And we have everyone joining us from all around the world. It's still your ELID conference. I've joined the sessions. I've joined about 2 or 3 sessions this morning, and I've enjoyed it so far. So here's just another session. I hope that I have permission to share my screen. I have everyone's. I have the topic all lined up. So today it's really a panel discussion between us, 4 training professionals who are going to dive into the topic of incorporating storytelling into learning and facilitation. And joined here by 3 professionals who really hone their own craft, right? So they have tons and tons of experience in facilitation and learning and development design. So let me pull up. Sorry, I'm working with 2 screens here, so forgive me. Just a second while I pull up my screen. Yes, so really, if you're joining this session, I want you to think of yourself as the main character, as the protagonist in this unfolding journey into learning about storytelling. So we think of us as your supporting cast. We're here to cheer you on as you embark on this learning experience. So here to speak on this topic is 3 panelists, and I'm going to read each of their bios before we begin. So Grace Monsurro, who you see on the screen, is an organizational development consultant, an inclusion strategist, and a cultural change advocate. She's dedicated to embedding equity and diversity and inclusion into business strategy. As the founder and CEO of Acquaint Consulting, she helps organizations foster authentic inclusion and improve workplace culture. She's Nigerian born and UK raised. Her lived experience as a Black woman and breast cancer thriver enriches her approach. She chairs the trustee at Every Future Foundation, and she champions racial equity and leadership. And her thought leadership has been featured in Elevate magazine, The Independent, and Irish News, amongst others. So welcome, Grace Monsurro. Can we get a clap for Grace? Awesome. Our next panelist is Ricardo Ginevri. Ricardo is a storytelling coach and public speaking trainer who has helped thousands of professionals in the UK and Ireland communicate with clarity and impact. Alongside his training work, he has led global technology projects at Accenture and HP across sectors like aerospace, insurance, and retail. A former president of the Accenture Speaker Toastmasters Club. I'm a Toastmaster, by the way. So, and officer at the PMI Toastmaster UK. He mentors others in public speaking and leadership. He is also a certified PMI and PMP professional. And finally, we have Anamaria Dorgo, who is a seasoned learning and community consultant, facilitator, and learning experience designer with a background in HR and L&D. She has been designing communities of practice and social learning spaces for the past 6 years. She is the founder of L&D Shakers, a free global community of practice for over 20,000 L&D professionals worldwide. Wow. Can we get a round of applause for our panelists today? Awesome. And you may have noticed a common theme among our panelists, right? So they are folks who freely give away their knowledge. They are here for the greater good, like most L&D professionals are, in my opinion. So just really excited about today's panel session. And it's really meant to be a laid back discussion between all 4 of us, including you, the audience. So we're here because of you, and hopefully you get something new, expand your knowledge from this experience. So we're going to dive right into it. Seeing that we've already spent a lot of time, we're going to dive right into it. How the panelists feeling this morning? Can we get some, just say something, just so we know we can hear you.
Energized?
All right, awesome.
Feeling good.
Okay, awesome. How about you, Anamaria?
Excited to be here.
Awesome, awesome. Yes, so we're going to dive right into it. Like, we hear the word storytelling all the time, and we know it means different things to different people. But I would like to hear your own perspective on storytelling. So this is a general question for all three of you, and so what's storytelling, and what's one key benefit of incorporating storytelling into learning and development? And I'm going to start with you, Grace.
So for me, storytelling is crucial with L&D, because when we think back to like some of the earliest stories we were told as kids, we get these warm, fuzzy feelings, right? It gets us feeling something. It gets us feeling engaged. It gets us remembering. So I think using storytelling in L&D is so important, because it activates hearts and minds. It engages people. It gets them kind of seeing themselves in the situation, or being able to identify with the feeling. I've got ADHD, so I really struggle in sessions where it's just data and facts and lots of information. But when you kind of interweave storytelling into sessions like that, it helps to just break up the heaviness sometimes and re-engages people. So for me, I think storytelling is so important, and it just wakes people up, right? It gets us involved. It gets us wanting to be part of the conversation. So yeah, I love it.
That's awesome. Yes, storytelling really does engage the audience in ways that nothing else can. Trainings seem to be flat sometimes, so just weaving stories into it really provides another perspective. So thanks for sharing that. Anamaria, do you have anything to add to what Grace just shared?
Yeah. For me, I feel they anchor us into a structure and a specific context. And so that's very, very helpful for our brains, because we can process, I think, recall even at times more complex information easier if it follows a story structure instead of a bunch of facts that are not anchored into a story. They capture attention, I think, and they also make us feel emotions. And evolutionary, I think humans are wired for story. So it's something very innate to us, very true to us. We don't need to have someone explain what storytelling is to us, because it comes so natural. We remember these stories because that's kind of how our brain works. We work in schemas and narratives, and we want to find sense into the information that it's being provided to us. And they're very useful to capture and maintain attention. And we can talk more about that if someone's interested in kind of neuroscience and studies and so on. I've been doing a bit of reading, and it's fascinating, really, the things that it can do to our brain and why they're actually very powerful to include, particularly in learning settings as well.
Wow. Yeah, I like that perspective that you've just shared. So really, you're letting us know that whether we like it or not, we're drawn towards storytelling. It's innate. It's something that it's already wired into us.
Yes.
That's good to know. So we're receptors, whether we like it or not. Oh, that's awesome. Ricardo,
Hey,
you're
okay.
a master storyteller, so this is your domain.
Well, I think that Grace and Anamaria already, let's say, put on top the things that why storytelling is so important and why it works very well. I mean, it's a superhuman, it's a superpower for humans, as you all already say. So let me go a little bit technical, because I'm lost. I would like to say that storytelling probably is very helpful in learning about environment, because help to make abstract knowledge something more a lived experience. So if you have to teach something that is it's completely abstract, like risk management session that we have seen before, then you can, with the stories and example, you can make it more lived, more relatable to people, so people can connect, be engaged, and remember that what we want definitely when we do a learning, when we design a learning, we want people to remember what we are teaching them.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just in extension to that, what are the main ingredients of a good story? Ricardo, you can go ahead with that one as well. So what are the essential elements of a good story in as regarding learning design?
Yeah, and in learning and design, I think that the elements for a good story, there should be three. Should be relevance, should be emotion, and should be transformation. Relevance, because of course the content and the story that we craft in our learning design needs to be, of course, relevant for the purpose of the learning that we are preparing. But then, of course, there should be emotion. That's the second point, because instead it's not a story. It's not grabbing our human DNA part that make us resonating with the stories, and then all the engaging and the memorable. And the third element that is it's a transformation. Think about the fact that a story should have, in Italian we say a morale, so it's an overarching meaning. But the point is the transformation in learning and development environment is very important. The stories normally are journey, transformational journey, and I think a story that serve a training, a learning, a design should bring a transformation, should bring you from the beginning of the learning to someone that is different, so transformed at the end of the learning. So these are the three elements for me. So relevance, emotion, and transformation for a good story in a learning design.
That's awesome. And I'm sure the audience will appreciate just those three things that you mentioned, especially about relevancy. Learning has to be relevant to the learner, so they can take action after experiencing it. And really, bringing the audience back into this, we want to hear from you as well. What are some stories? What are some ways that you incorporate stories into your learning design? Please go ahead and share it in the chat. If there are any questions in the chat, also feel free to please let me know about it so I can bring it up to the panel as well. But as far as our next question, I'm going to call on Grace to tell us how storytelling can improve facilitation in learning environment, which is close to what Ricardo just answered. But I would like to hear from Grace, please.
Thank you. So I'm actually going to touch on a point that Ricardo made. I work in diversity and inclusion, which is a very emotional topic, right? And when delivering sessions to people that maybe, are there because they don't want to be there, or are there worried that the sessions are going to bring up things for them, there's a massive kind of avoidance of DEI because of this kind of fear of being blamed for something, right? So I use storytelling to help people to get comfortable with being uncomfortable and to lean into the vulnerability. So I traditionally will start a lot of my sessions telling my personal story, because I think it helps to give people some insights into the lived experience of someone who identifies as, having intersecting identities, where I might be delivering sessions to people that maybe don't understand that lived experience. And what I really find is, in telling my story, it helps people to let down their walls a little bit and to think, wow, you know, she's connecting with me in a way that she doesn't really have to. You know, she's making space for me to know more about her. And that's an honor in itself, right? As humans, when you think about some of the best leaders you've had people that have let you into their lives a little bit. Those are usually the people that come to mind, the people whose, you know, children you might have known the names of, whose wives you knew the names of, or husbands or partners, etc. And there's something about having that connection with people, right? And we get that through storytelling, especially if it's telling kind of real lived stories. And in my work, it's really, really impactful. I don't think there's any session that I deliver without telling a story, whether it's my personal story or a story of someone who has experienced marginalization, or a story of someone who's had a breakthrough in a session, someone who maybe came into that session really closed off to the idea of diversity and inclusion, and they heard one story and their mindset changed. I think as learning professionals, we're always looking for that moment the penny drops in a session, right? Where you see that someone is like, wow, I get it. You know, I get it and I love it. And I know that one of the sessions that I delivered a while ago, I had a white gentleman say, you know, I think my company is really accessible. It's easy for everyone to get a job here. There's equal opportunities. I wasn't asked about my ethnic background in my application. And I said, that is fantastic, but let me put something into perspective for you. My Yoruba name is Oluwagbemisola, and my surname is Monsurro, right? If we had a CV that said Oluwagbemisola Monsurro and we had John Smith, who do you think is more likely to get invited to an interview? And literally, all I could see was his mouth trying to say my name again. And that was the moment in which he said, I get it. And that sticks with me, you know, because I know for a fact that man left that session a changed person in terms of his perspective and understanding of what the lived experience can be for marginalized people, just because of fear, right? So for me, storytelling in the work that I do is essential, because I'm sometimes dealing with people that don't want to be there. But once you hear some really emotive stories, you're like, actually, I want to learn more. I want to be here now. So I pull it. It's my party trick, really. I love storytelling.
Right. That's very awesome, and great example as well. And you know, just as I listened to you, I also felt like maybe I ought to share a little bit more about myself, just so you know I can maybe help assimilate the content a little better. For me, it's my first time chairing a panel like this. So yeah, hope that makes anyone out there who's looking to do the same feel a little more comfortable doing it. It's really a fun experience, and I'm really enjoying every minute of it. So are there any other stories from our other panelists that we can think of that, you know, maybe an example, it could be something at your workplace, or is there anything, and are there any other stories you can think of that, any other good examples you can think of that, you know, where you incorporated storytelling and it made a switch for somebody?
Yeah, we have a comment in the chat here, says, I use storytelling, that's Everly. I use storytelling in facilitation and designs to explain complex concept or long, complicated process, and it works like a gem. I train on policy, risk management, legislation, and complex technical knowledge in law enforcement environments. Yeah, that's a great example.
Nice. Very nice to hear that you're already using storytelling inside of your on your day-to-day job. That's great to hear. Ricardo, Anamaria, any stories we can think of?
For me, it's there's one example that comes to mind. I do a lot of community work, so I meet a lot of people very often for the first time. And so we're strangers, and I have witnessed very often the power that personal stories have to create connections very fast amongst strangers and new people. So if you add an element in your, I think that's very relevant for for example, cohort-based learning experiences where you bring a group of people together for a set period of time, I think it's worth taking the time at the start of that journey to really embed storytelling amongst them, between them, in smaller groups, as a driver, a channel for true, meaningful, deeper connection to happen. Because we know that when we learn in cohorts, a great ingredient is the trust that we can build as learners with one another to truly open up and maybe sometimes raise a hand and say, I don't get this, pick me up, or like I'm behind, or so I think stories at the start of a learning journey, it's worth really embedding the time to do that. My most memorable stories that I remember from others are from strangers that took the time when we first met to share something very deeply personal to them and meaningful for them. And that just, I always saw a part of me in that story, in everyone's story, no matter where we are in the world, no matter how different we are. I could feel, because I think we feel the same emotions as humans. And so it's so relatable, and that builds that trust that, oh, we are more alike maybe than we are different at times. So that gives the warm fuzzies, that what Grace was saying, like this warm inside. Yeah.
That's awesome. Now really training and facilitation back into this. How does storytelling, how does it impact it? Ricardo, I think do you have an example of how storytelling has impacted in line with training and facilitation?
Okay, I have to say that, first of all, I do training about storytelling. So I tell people that storytelling works. So I make people understanding that they can tell stories. And so so most of my training are dedicated to make people click and find the haha moment and say, you know what, when I was young, I was able to tell a story. When I was young, I was able to tell stories, and now in professional environment or because I grew up, stories are not anymore for me. I would like to go for data and facts, and I try to make people understanding that storytelling is not just only, of course, is telling our stories or telling a story that is related to our objective, but it's a 360 skills. Sometimes it's enough to, here in UK, I mean, I'm from Italy, but I live in UK, and here in UK, the big argument I see a statistic is about the weather, because the weather is connecting everyone, and everyone can just go and say, oh, today was the weather was very bad. I mean, it's a little story in the end. It's a story about, for example, I'm coming from Rome, and Rome now is a springtime, and here in UK, well, today is a very grayish springtime, and it's a story itself. And I start connecting with people. So the point is, stories are everywhere, are with us. There is a research that says that our brain normally process something like close to 4,000 stories every day. Because every time that we walk down to the street or we do everything, our brain translates everything like a little story. But we don't recognize this. And so that my storytelling experience in learning environment or in teaching how to use a storytelling, you can just go in front of an audience and talk about your experience related to the audience about, I mean, I'm a little bit also neurodivergent. So sometimes I use this little story about myself to connect with the audience. Or sometimes when I'm in professional environment, I just, for example, I'm in London, I talk about a little story about my commuting. It's just a few seconds that help to connect with people, to create a human connection. So stories are everywhere. And that's the point, is you can implement storytelling and the skills to storytelling everywhere, because we are a storyteller. I think Anamaria remember that storytelling is capable in our DNA as a human. So it's something that everyone has, but most of us coming from the professional environment, having a background as a project and program manager, I'm sitting as a project manager in meeting rooms, in a very high-stake situation. I saw many people messing up things because they want to go with the data, because they want to look professional, and they were very dry, very unrelatable, very boring. Also with the status reporting or with the telling to the client that there was some problems. Use this human superpower, use the storytelling, use a few seconds to relate of what's going on. I think you're muted, Samuel. Yet.
Yes. Okay. I'm unmuted now. Now, as you were talking, one thing that stuck out to me was, just using simple things like the weather to connect with people before even with your audience, before even starting your training is important. And it reminded me of a post I saw on LinkedIn the other day. I mean, anyone can write anything on LinkedIn nowadays. Someone did say something like, you shouldn't ask people, well, it must have been an attention grabber, or their own way of telling the story too, that rather than say where you're joining from when starting the meeting, you should maybe say something that connects better with people. But I personally like that question. So asking people where they're joining from, especially for a global conference such as this one. So what are some of the challenges of storytelling that you can think of? And this question will go to Anamaria. What are some challenges for story? What challenges do we face when we tell stories regarding facilitation?
Yeah, I think that sometimes we get very hung up into the technicalities of designing a story, and there's an art to that. There are better storytellers than others, for sure. There are tools, there are technique. You can go and learn this, and obviously Toastmasters is a great way to flex that public speaking and the storytelling skills. So I think that might be sometimes a challenge. We get too caught up into techniques or formats. Whereas if we put them aside and just trust our intuition, again, as humans that have been telling stories around the fire since forever, since the fire was invented, we are capable of doing that. But it's true that there are better stories than others. And I think a good story has to have a certain hook that captivates. In order for us to feel the emotional connection to that, I first have to pay attention. If I'm not paying attention to the story, if I feel I've heard it before, it's so predictable, then when my attention's not hooked into the piece, then I'm not taking the benefit out of that. And that's not my fault. That happens automatically. It's just how our brains work. So the challenge is, how do I open up the story? How do I spend some time there to hook the person and make sure that the brains are hooked to the story and they're paying attention and they're focused on it? Because only once I do that, I can take all of the goodness that gets from releasing all of the dopamine and oxytocin and all the good hormones when we hear stories and we feel trusted, connected with others, and we see ourselves in the other piece. That's one thing. And I think sometimes if a story doesn't land, stories also don't land. And I always, for me, as an advice for myself, I always tend to share stories that are coming from my experience. And I always am very vocal about that. And I'm telling people, this is my experience, my lived experience. I don't want to present a story in a way that it's a must or it's a given, because that can elicit the opposite effect in listeners if they don't see themselves in a story. So it's always good to put, this is my experience, my lived experience. Here's what I've went through. Here's what I've heard. This is what I've gone through, and just make it very personal so that people can hear it and pick and choose the things that make sense for them, but also know that it's safe to discard or to to not take on board, because it's okay to say, oh, that's interesting, Samuel, that's your experience. My experience is totally different. So stories should also invite people, should feel safe enough to invite people to say, oh, what an interesting perspective. I had the totally opposite experience with the same thing, or I see it very differently. And so a challenge is not to present stories as facts, because they're not facts. They're just lived experiences. That's what I have. I think that's what comes to mind. I'm not sure if Grace or Ricardo have any other kind of challenges that they faced.
Well, no, I definitely agree. I definitely agree that, I mean, stories are definitely rooted in a cultural environment, rooted I always tell everyone, know your audience. It's a very important. I mean, it's not just a public speaking or Toastmaster kind of things that when you're going to speak with an audience or with everyone, you need to adjust your story. You needed to adjust your content. I would like also to connect with one of the comments from Sachin. The content is important. Of course, the delivery, I mean, the public speaking or the telling stories, it's made of elements. There is the content, there is the structure, and there is the delivery. If you just deliver, maybe you're a very good humorous person, but you don't land, especially in a learning environment, with the transformation, with the teaching. And the content is relevant for your audience. As Grace was saying before, if you are going to teach something to a audience that is very emotional, is very sensible to some topics, you needed to be careful of what is your content. You needed to be to fine-tune your stories and find the right stories that connect with them, was the relevance and the relatable that we were talking before. So it's we can all tell stories, but I agree with Anamaria. You needed to add a group of skills. You needed to practice a group of skills to your ability to tell stories. But again, it's not something that comes natural. It's something that you can nurture. It's something that you can own and perfection with the time. Someone's see a TED talk, just a very clear example, and look to the speaker, say, "Oh, this person is so natural delivering this great TED talk." But the reality is, as everything behind this this feeling that is very natural, is very engaging, is very great story structure, something like that, there is a lot of work. There is a lot of practice.
Yes. Totally agree.
Yeah. So stories works. But as everything, they work as much as we put them in owning and nurturing them.
Yeah. And thanks for sharing that perspective as well. I think one thing that stood out to me was, we have to also know our audience, right? So knowing your audience will help you deliver a better message and connect with them at a level where you ordinarily wouldn't be able to. The next question will go to Grace. What I'd like to know from you, Grace, is why is it important to build learning, design, and facilitation with intersectionality in mind? I know this is something that you're passionate about. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I think it's really important to make sure that as much as possible, your content relates to the people in the room. And I think that when we fail to have that intersectional lens on things, we can often leave people out. So it's just really important to think about, in every session that you're delivering, how does this potentially work for someone with neurodiversity? How does this potentially tap into an experience of someone with a disability or someone who is from a different race, etc. So just thinking about, how do I build that into my session? And is there, whether it's in the imagery that you use, whether it's in some of the language that you use, whether it's in the alternative methods that you use to communicate information during the session. So using videos for part of the session, kind of having diagrams, etc. How are you building in just tools and things that appeal to and meet the needs of people with intersecting identities?
Yeah. I totally agree with that approach. And as we think about storytelling, I'm also reminded of one of my just favorite technique for storytelling, which is Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. Yeah, if that's a concept we're familiar with, how do we incorporate the hero's journey into our facilitation, for example? How do we have any examples that of where this has happened, and how has that worked? How effective has that been? So the hero's journey in your facilitation. And this is just a general question. And, it's not only limited to our panelists. If anyone has a good example, they can come off mute and share as well. Ricardo, I saw you nod your head. Can you walk us through the hero?
I'll start briefly. I mean, the hero journey is it's a basic of every stories, and is the one that works always. And then if you analyze any kind of stories that we heard, and we say the hero journey is always there. Very briefly, the hero journey, just to remind to maybe someone don't know what we are talking about, is you have a character, a person that is living his life, and at a certain point something happened. For example, he become that suddenly he discovered that he have a lightsaber in a place, and then the family that he was living with is not his own family, and one time he found yourself in the space fighting with some very dark lord, and that's a critical moment. That's the moment where the hero say, okay, I'm no one, how can fight against these big powers? So there is the top of the climax, but then something happened during the journey of the hero. That hero find some mystical power, or find some wise green frog that help him to understand that he can make it, and finally he defeat the evil power, and there is a new moment. There is an after the story where the hero or restart is before life, or have a new life. So this is the very basic hero journey. You can enrich with a lot of moments during the journey, but the point is, a story works if there is a character that you can relate, if there is an emotion, so a moment of climax that something seems that is going wrong, so there are troubles, there are obstacles, and it works after the obstacle, something is going to happen. Hopefully is a good things. We have seen that sometimes there's not always a good things, but the story in teaching that probably want to use is a good things that is going to happen, and there is the so-called the new normal. So there is the morale, the transformation, the end of the journey. So this is the hero journey. You can use you can recognize is used in many situations, and you can use in many situations in learning. I would like to leave how use it to maybe Grace or Anamaria, but this is the hero journey, just to explain to everyone that maybe no heard it before.
Yeah.
I used it a lot in structuring my own stories, or a story that I'm using, like that I am telling or that I am sharing. And I've also used it as a way to design a small group activity in a workshop, or in a conference in this case. So you have the call to adventure. This is the task that we all have to go on a quest. We all have to achieve something. So that's kind of how you start the activity. Then they start working on it. And if you want to use the same arc of, well, who are the helpers, like usually someone comes and like you get some help. So maybe you want to keep, I sometimes work with envelopes, right? So I have the groups come out and they start to play with the thing, or get try out to solve the challenge or the task by themselves. And then sometime mid-term, I introduce these envelopes in which they usually find the missing piece of the puzzle, something that they can include, something that they haven't thought about, something that I kept secret, and it should speed up the process of them solving the challenge. And then you kind of have the solving of the challenge, and you could I can definitely see it used as well to structure a debrief of a learning experience. So pick the hero's journey, that some of the questions, and try to structure the conversation of a debrief of an experience based on that. So what did you have to do? What happened? What was the task? What was clear? What was unclear? How did you help? Like, what were the key moments that helped you find the solution, etc.? So just use the questions around the for the debrief. I think those are two things, one that I've used and one that I'm thinking now, oh, that could be actually a really cool way to debrief an experience using the hero's journey. So that's all comes to mind.
That's awesome. Grace, before we let you go, do you have any final thoughts before, just to tie up everything we've discussed?
I think for me, I think storytelling helps us to see the impossible as being possible, particularly, for like boring stuff, like learning how to use a new system or data or all of that stuff. It's actually building stories into that helps people to see how other organizations or other people have benefited by using this new methodology or by using this new approach, etc. So it just makes the impossible seem possible. As humans, we are naturally averse to change. I think storytelling is crucial to help us to actually get a bit more comfortable with it. So that's all I will add. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so sorry that I've got to jump.
Right. Round of applause for Grace as she says goodbye.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Appreciate your time.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye, Grace.
Bye, Grace. Thank you.
Bye.
Yes. And, I see we're running out of time as well. So do you have any final thoughts or any takeaways for the audience as we embark on our own journeys?
Okay, I will go first. My takeaway is definitely use storytelling in your design, learning your in your designing your training, your learning, your facilitation session. It may be useful to connect with your audience. It may be useful to do as an icebreaker in the beginning. It may be useful to make people in a room knowing each other. Try to find very simple ways to use stories to do this, or use a more extensive approach, like Anamaria was saying, to elicit reflection at the end. Or if you are doing, like me, storytelling training, train your attendees to understand that they can be a better communicator, just practicing to tell fairy tales in the evening to their children, to their friends, to their dogs or cats, or just, let's say, to the moon, whatever it is. Just practice a little bit and make sure that you can recognize the storyteller that is you, because it's in every human. Use the technique. Of course, there are a lot of techniques that you need to put in place, but the first one is the passion, is the willing to tell something that resonates with you.
Right. And as I hear that, I'm thinking, be willing to be vulnerable as well. So, just being able to share your own story, I think.
You needed to be vulnerable, to be authentic. I think Anamaria mentioned this before. Tell stories that are your stories. Don't tell the story of someone else. We are filled of stories.
Right.
I think for me, and there was Everly put in this in the chat as well. Like, I designed a gamified experience, and I think Becca mentioned the concept of scenario-based learning or project-based learning. I would like us. I think the first thing when you think about storytelling is there's an individual that tells a story. So I am telling a story as a facilitator, or and so it's an anecdote, a personal story that I'm sharing, or a way to transmit content or information that I pack in a form of a story. That's the first thing that I think about. But I guess my invitation for us all today is to think, well, how can storytelling show up in other ways and forms besides an individual that tells a story? And so things like, for me, as a community builder, I think that social learning, it's a form of storytelling too. When people get together to talk to one another, a relatable story that a peer shares in a breakout room, it naturally draws you in because it's probably embedded in a similar work situation that you are. And I think these peer stories of other people that have a similar context or a similar job or similar role, it really taps into this need that we have to understand, well, why do I even care about this? Right? So Samuel is talking like, why do I care about that? Well, you care about that because we're both L&D and we're both trying to work on this whatever thing. So that already pulls me in. So, but then there's also this designing of experiences as formats. I love to use these choose your own adventure type of design in my, it doesn't matter if it's an online conference or a community event. How do you get people to choose different paths and have different challenges that they're solving? Or there's this concept of a quest. You go on an adventure and you're challenged, and then we scaffold learning throughout. The scenario-based learning, VR, AI avatars are now all the rave simulations and all that. So I'm trying to tell that we can infuse, storytelling shows up in so many different shapes and forms, and we should be curious about them and be daring and bold to experiment with them beyond just me telling a story, which is the first thing that we think about, right? When we hear storytelling, that's it. So personalized learning simulation, that's storytelling. When I'm immersed into something, that's a story, and I'm actually in it. I'm not listening to it. I am in it. That's even more powerful because I'm feeling in the moment. I'm thinking in the moment.
Yeah, I like the idea of, bringing your audience into it. So whether it's a virtual session or, that's why I like breakout rooms. So breakout rooms allow people to converse, during the session and bring their own knowledge to the forefront as well. And thinking about breakout rooms, I have seen situations where breakout rooms have been set up and you can actually choose which rooms you want to log into based upon, just a topic, or, that's one way to do it. Choose your own adventure, virtual session. So great insights. I know we're over time, so I will like to stop here. But before that, would just like to say a big thank you to everyone who joined the session, to the organizers of this conference, Oyidamola. Appreciate your.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists. I call you the powerhouse panel, and it's been a great one. It's been really, really amazing. One thing that Samuel, you've been fantastic today. But one thing you didn't do is to tell us about yourself. I'm sure the audience would like to know a bit about you. Introduce yourself briefly before we close.
Absolutely. Nigerian born, live in the US. I've been an L&D professional for about 10 years, trained as an animator, and somehow got into instructional design and e-learning development. Recently became a comedian. Lots of other stuff. So, but I'll be brief. That's it about me. Yeah.
Great, amazing. I was actually hoping you were going to tell us one or two jokes today, but it's okay.
I'm working on it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. So that brings us to the end of this particular session. As usual, let's go to the reflection tree and put in all our takeaways for today. I've learned so many things today about being intentional. One thing that really stood out to me is that tell your own story. You'll be more authentic telling your own story rather than using other people's stories. You need to start getting comfortable about sharing your own story. And so whatever your takeaway is, just go ahead and share on the reflection tree. We're going to go for lunch now. We've been here since morning. We'll be back at 2:15. So we have 2 more sessions to go. Number 1 is the workshop on storyline, and then our keynote by Andrew. So come back at 2:15. You'll definitely get a reminder in your email if you're registered to join us at 2:15. So it's been an amazing day. I wish you all a great time during lunch. So see you later at 2:15. Let's show some love to our panelists. Actually, let's use the reactions, the emojis, the soundboard. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Let's keep it coming. Whoa, that's interesting. Yeah. Amazing. Thank you, Powerhouse panel. So, and also you can always have access to this board even when the session is not on. If you haven't put in your reflection for the session about the sessions earlier, please make sure you do so that you don't forget. So see you guys later. Take care and bye for now.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Anamaria.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.